All right. Well, hello to the people who are watching. I'm sorry for the delay. The fault was mine. I miscalculated the commute, and I'm here with Mr. Dean Esmay. And I think we're going to be just talking about general YouTube stuff, perhaps a little bit about theism and some of his projects, and just I think we're also going to be addressing a little bit our approaches to online dialogue in particular, because I think that's probably part of the way that we really differ. So I guess, do we want to go on and just introduce yourself, Dean, and tell us what you're currently working on?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I am, by the way, I am changing most of my online stuff to use the working name, pen name, whatever, Max, specifically Max Kobe. And so you're going to see more and more of my videos are just referring to me as Max. I'm not hiding the fact of what my real name is,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an effort not only to honor my confirmation saint who's important to me, but also to kind of force people to start thinking about the ideas rather than focusing on me. Because while it's true that I've been something of a firebrand toward the atheist community, for which I have no apologies, is although if I've hurt some individuals' feelings because I went too far sometime, let me know. We'll talk. I'm only human. But I do think the online atheism community deserves a good bit more criticism than it gets.
So
And
you're now working. You're referring to your anti-atheist project, right? Because
which is my primary work right now. Yeah, that
yes.
is. It's called Escaping Atheism. I had started. I had no real formal name of the project. Actually, I had a name I called God and Man in the 21st Century until I finally realized that's a boring name and nobody likes it.
Huh.
I had also thought about Letter to a Heathen Nation, but people just got mad. They didn't see the tongue-in-cheek irony of it, and they just got fussy. And I wound up doing a poll asking people
Well,
their
I
names.
actually just caught TJ the Amazing Atheist fire back on your thing. I think that was a few days ago or something. I don't know.
He does
I
seem
checked.
to have, yeah. My TLDR is that I don't think TJ said anything there that most atheists haven't said, and I don't see things his way at all. Sorry. We'll see about responding to things because let me just add on. I'm going by the online moniker Max, not only to try and get people to focus on the ideas rather than the person, but we really are a team of 5 over at Escaping Atheism. All of us are Christian, but not the same denomination at all.
Mhm.
And we're trying to be secular. And we are all united in our view that cultural atheism is awful. And we don't care if atheists are offended that we think atheism is stupid and awful and culturally toxic. We think atheism is stupid and awful and culturally toxic. Thus, the question becomes, how do you deal with it? And I know there's a certain percentage of people who really don't appreciate the project we have collectively agreed on our team, which is that we are intentionally quite blunt, quite acerbic, quite sarcastic, quite biting, quite we're not particularly nice about it. And so that's where the controversy probably comes. We also don't try and be super inclusive. That is, um, while we're very firm in our view that God especially is not owned by any religion. God's a universal concept understood across cultures, understood instinctively by most people. Science shows us. And so while we don't approve of religious extremists and fringes and all that, so we don't like just blanket defend all religion. I think everybody on the team would probably agree. Yeah, you're probably better off as like a deist or even like a theistic Taoist or something like that.
So just to cut, you're trying to just make a direct criticism of sort of capital New Atheism, that is, like the Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens variety.
Well, sure, and you did a real good. That would be the basis of it. I mean, let's be fair, and let's be fair. This is cultural criticism, and we keep saying over
Mhm.
and over again that it's cultural criticism. I actually start the new atheist phenomenon that I'm critical of with Penn Jillette, who I do not have a lot of respect for at all, and whose work I know very, very well, since I was for years and years and years a big fan. So I've seen the entire run of Bullshit, seen so many of his shows, have done a complete 180 on the man and his work. Don't like him at all. I mean, as a person, he may be nice, but I think in our current culture, we put too much emphasis on whether or not someone's nice. And in fact, this is one I'll lob at you. When I was young, the main question you didn't ask whether or not somebody was nice. You asked if they were a good person. People seem to understand that being liked and being a good person didn't always necessarily go together.
Sure.
I find that in the current population, we seem to. I really do think this comes from when we're a godless society. I didn't even say Christian, right?
Yes.
Plenty of people have God who aren't Christian. When you have a godless society, you wind up reducing everything to how other people value you. So in fact, one of the things I've noticed about cultural atheism, even if somebody's not really, they say, I'm not an atheist, but they're functionally around with no religion and no real interest in it and no thought about things like that, you wind up functionally atheist, and thus social capital means more to you. Whereas I usually find somebody who's more rooted in God or spirituality is less concerned with what people think of them, whether or not they're nice.
Yeah, I think that is certainly true. I think, though, when you're talking about conversations, I think that sort of like the candor that you bring to a conversation is very tactical, actually. If you're trying to convince people of things, if you're trying to seek common ground and demonstrate that, I think that, especially with the new atheists, I think that like mud fights are kind of where they thrive. And well, I have my own opinion about the new atheists that we'll probably get into. I've actually not made it a main point to try to really go after them, because I see new atheism, like the new capital atheism, atheism as identity, as more or less a dead letter. I think that the fact that non-belief will still be around, but I think atheism as identity, it started dying the second Atheism Plus started, and it's just going to keep on going downward. I think it's a product of a very particular time in 2007, and it really cannot exist in any kind of future state, because it's so linked to that moment in 2007, 2008.
I saw your video on that. Why you're not a new atheist, and I watched it. I agree with almost all your points. I can't think of anything in particular I disagreed with you on. I disagree with you here. I think what we call new atheism is widespread, and while atheism itself, as in the disbelief in God, which is what most real atheism is, that's on the decline worldwide and otherwise. They don't know that, though. People don't know that because there's simply no denying. You see people are still putting big money into ad campaigns to promote atheism. The team of us on Escaping Atheism, plus a number of our friends, there's a growing awareness among Christians of various denominations that atheism is organized activity. And it's undeniably organized activity.
Do you think that's going to be effective, though? I think that, the thing is, atheism really got its boost in 2007 because it was an attempt to essentially blame the deficiencies of the liberal multicultural order on religious people. And it was easier to do that than single out certain groups and cultures. But now we're in a totally different environment. Steve Shive's atheism is something like Sargon of Akkad's atheism, is nothing like T.J. Kirk's atheism. And as such, the identity of atheism as a capital A tool is functionally meaningless.
There's an area where we don't agree at all. And I think that where we see atheism, I think the new atheist phenomenon was planned and exploited in, what's the word? It was planned. Basically, the same cultural Marxist forces, the same social justice forces that got into the press and took over things like Huffington Post. They started with things like Huffington Post and Daily Kos, but now you find them all over the place in the mainstream media.
But I don't think the atheist community right now is uniformly cultural Marxist.
No,
I
they
think
just,
there is a very definitive split. And
well,
that's, I think, what needs to be addressed right now in our contemporary age.
okay, well, what I would say is anybody who is an anti-cultural Marxist atheist,
Mhm.
if I don't hear strong refutation of anti-religious sentiment from you, I don't want you as an ally. I don't want Sargon of Akkad as an ally if
Mhm.
he's going to be nasty to religious people, which he is, nasty and contemptuous to religious people. I don't
He
want to
can
be
be.
allies. I don't want to be allies with Shoe on Head or Armored Skeptic when they're nasty as fuck to religious people, and they are regularly. And I believe
But
religious
these are
people,
potential allies, though. I
I don't
mean,
want them as allies. Literally, I'm saying, no, I don't want you as an ally unless you come and ask. And what that's going to require is outright respect for religion, not just I'll grudgingly accept you as an ally, even though you have your fairy stories. My answer is fuck you. I don't want you as an ally, and I don't want you near my kids. And I really think
respect
that way.
oftentimes grows out of allyship in a political battle. For instance, a lot of Protestants gain respect for Catholics due to the fact that they were both allies in a pro-life cause. I know a lot of Protestants who had very negative opinions of Catholics, and then once joining a pro-life organization and seeing the work, they gained respect. When I see people like Armored Skeptic or Shoe on Head, these people have very, very little contact with thoughtful religious people.
Well,
And
they do.
because of that, their views are very negative, but it's a cultural thing.
It is a cultural thing, and what I see there is a very toxic and hateful cultural thing that I want nothing to do with. I'm involved actively in telling religious people you can push back against atheist bullies because bullying is what most atheists do. Many of us have been bullied by atheists, many of us have been harassed by atheists. They
Mhm.
are an organized cultish phenomenon. And from my perspective, and I'm just giving it to you straight, literally, I'll repeat, I don't want any of those people as allies. I don't
Mhm.
want them. And
But I mean,
I
the
won't
idea would
have them.
be, yeah,
I
no,
won't
I mean, it's
have
fine. That's a totally, it's a legit. Some people ally with different people. I think that I know enough about cultural Marxism to understand how powerful it is. I think this is something. I think Sargon underestimates the power of cultural Marxism. I even think the alt-right underestimates the power of cultural Marxism. If this thing is going to be confronted, uh, there needs to be some kind of big tent. There needs to be communities of people who understand principles that recognize them as. Dean, I understand what you're saying, right? Because there are certain types of people that I just don't know how to communicate with. For instance, I don't know how to communicate with nihilists, like straight up nihilists, because I don't know what to say to them, right? Like, okay, you don't believe any kind of imperative statements can be made legitimately. So how am I supposed to have a conversation? But I mean, for instance, depending on how you define it, I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example here. I mean, take a look like Thomas Nagel, for instance, or there's any number of atheists that I think you might agree are sort of very close to the more Christian worldview, even if they haven't gone the final step yet.
and I'm happy to talk to those people. And one of the things that I'm going to keep saying we because I really want people to.
Sure.
If you read SJW is always a lie, you'll see that this is the always attack. Make it about the man rather than the issues. Well, let me tell
Yes.
you, I am going by Max, and I've got a team of 5, and we all feel the same way, and we hear from other people all the time too. Religious people who say, "I can't fucking stand atheists. They're obnoxious. They're nasty. I hate them. Thank you for saying something." I hear
Hmm.
occasionally from atheists who say, "I'm really glad you're challenging the community. They make me sick to be an atheist sometimes." Um, at some,
What community in particular? I mean, it seems to me that at this point, I mean, before there was like one atheist community, but now it seems like they're dividing
okay,
faster than I can even keep track of them.
it's good to see. Because I'm going to back up and say where I
Very
think you
predictable
and I.
too.
It is actually because atheism can't. Atheism is incoherent. It can't cohere around anything. So it either coheres around some new political ideology or just plain hatred of religion. And that's one of the reasons I truly believe when you look at history, going back to like Cicero, even in Rome, you know, non-Christian sources all over the place, deists all over the place saying never trust an atheist, don't trust atheists, atheism is bad. They're not Christians, they're not Jews, they're not any religion, and they're still saying that. And when
I
you look at it,
that's because of association with nihilism, right?
I think
For
it's the
instance,
nihilism and cynicism. Nihilism and cynicism go with
yeah.
atheism so much that they become culturally toxic. That's been the view for thousands of
I mean, if you
years.
think that there's no good and no evil, or you think death is better than life, I talked to someone who thought death was better than life and that humans should cease to exist as a species. It's very difficult to actually form a societal uh, basis around thoughts like that. But the thing is that so many atheists, I don't think actually are atheists in the broadest sense. They'd be people a lot like Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson, people who are, they don't understand the very sophisticated arguments of Christianity, and because of that, they kind of dissociate, but they still believe in a core transcendent principle of right and wrong. And those
Well,
people are
yes.
absolutely allies in the fight against nihilism.
To go back with where, and this probably is at the the gravamen of our disagreement.
Hmm.
I think the new atheist phenomenon was directly an outgrowth of the cultural Marxists. I think that's exactly why they exist. And if you look at all of the new atheist talking points on religion, every single one of them is a Marxist talking point. They can all be sourced to a Marxist. All the arguments they bring up can be sourced to Marxist sources ultimately.
I suppose. I mean, several of them are pre-Marxist.
And I genuinely believe, well, some of them, I literally think that cultural Marxists, the same cultural Marxists in the universities that gave us the social justice that we see now, planned and executed the new atheist craze. I think that happened. Okay, that's specifically
I might disagree because
saying.
I mean you can't plan movements, so.
But it was a media blitz, and I remember it so well. These people came out of nowhere, and I was kind of impressed with some of them. In fact,
2008. That was
I
the time.
briefly called myself a bright,
Hmm.
which was a little before that, but it came out of Daniel Dennett. I mean, I was really a serious atheist.
Hmm.
And I thought really well of Daniel Dennett. I thought really well of Christopher Hitchens. I thought really well of Penn Jillette. I thought really well of, I always thought Sam Harris was crazy. At least I was right there, because he's crazy and he's horrible and he's dishonest.
Daniel Dennett was the person who I didn't like even when I was an atheist.
Yeah.
He seemed to debunk human existence itself as a means to get at attacking the existence of God, which I thought was ridiculous.
Here's the thing: we see again, our team has found this, and other people we talk to have found this. Atheists still run in packs online. They harass people. They mock them. They try and get them. They drive them offline. They've driven more than one person I know offline just for fighting them.
But wouldn't the solution to be create spaces for people to discuss things, YouTube channels of religious people? I mean,
isn't it interesting that historically, you're right, we should have religious channels. In fact, YouTube has religious content, but you have to go look for it because they don't have a religious category, which I find interesting. A lot of sites don't have religious categories anymore, even though anytime you look, you will find religion's as popular as it's ever been.
mm-hmm.
And the rate of religious belief is as popular as it's ever been. The only thing that's shifted in the United States is that we've seen a growth in people who identify religiously as nuns, N-O-N-E, none, no religion, which is also common in the UK and Europe. And atheists have often trumpeted that through their propaganda organs as the fact that people are waking up and leaving religion. No, it turns out, I can give you a couple of references on this.
No, I understand. Nuns.
In fact, if nuns aren't, nuns turn out they believe in reincarnation, they believe in heaven and hell, they believe in life after death, they believe in all kinds. Some of them will even literally say, "Yes, I believe in God."
Yeah, the people that call moral therapeutic deism. There was one sociologist that labeled that as being the primary religion of people who said they didn't have a religion.
Yeah. And I otherwise hew to the and I think most of us do. I really hew to the idea that if you don't have an idea of God, if you don't have a view of a good solid spirituality is natural to the human animal. We evolved this capacity, and I believe we needed it, and I believe science backs me up on that. And I just mean spirituality generally. If you don't address that spiritual need, you'll get into some weird political ideology, or you'll turn nihilist, or you'll turn.
Can I ask you a question though? Like, what's the audience like for your particular style? Because, I mean, frankly, Dean, like, I mean, I've, I mean, I don't want to be too blunt, but you're quite infamous for alienating people. Like, people that I consider to be part of my community in my regular circle of people who discuss religion and religious issues on my channel. So I'm curious, like, I'm curious what the audience, are you addressing your content to atheists? Are we trying to create a big tent for religious believers, I guess? I mean, that's what I'm kind of trying to figure out here, you know?
That's an interesting question. And I may have alienated some people. I know I've alienated some atheists, and I literally don't care. And I may have alienated some religious people, but we're not necessarily, or we may have alienated some religious. There are some religious people who also doesn't really, you know, for example, you see a Mormon coming in, start bashing Catholics. I'm sorry, that conversation's not going to go very far with me. It's just not.
Well, I mean, what I mean, bashing. I mean, there's going to be theological disagreements between Mormons and Catholics.
Oh, sure.
But the way that we should handle it is to table these disagreements so that we do not start huge knife fights between Mormons and Catholic people who are interested in building a community to push back against cultural Marxism and other aspects of what we rightfully see as destructive forces in our society.
Where I grew up, there was a sort of because I'm 50, right? So I'm old. When I grew up, there was a sort of broad understanding that religious people wouldn't argue. And what I think that the new atheist craze and the cultural Marxist set did with that is they took advantage of the fact that various flavors of religious types in the U.S. got in the habit of not mentioning their religious convictions publicly so that there wouldn't be arguments.
Yes,
but what I think that's
absolutely true.
But what I think that morphed into was atheists privileging themselves as the rational voice in conversations.
Actually, that is a correct point. That is correct. The assumption of secularism in the public square was adopted as a mechanism for diplomacy.
Yes.
But then it was exploited by atheism as an implicit assumption that the public square would be explicitly atheist, which was never the assumption. But hold on, Dean, there's a corollary to this, right? Which is that if we're all going to be announcing our theological convictions in the public square, and we want to actually have sway over this public square, we can't start excommunicating each other, religious people, for disagreements. Now, if they're really bad, like nihilism or cynical anti-humanism, anti-humanity sentiments, then maybe you could do that. But if it's just like, I don't like my Lutheran friend, and I'm like, you know, go read the Council of Trent, F off, right? Then we will approve that the public sphere has to be secular, because otherwise everyone will just excommunicate each other.
From my perspective, I generally know how to do that, but when somebody shows me that they don't know how to do it, I just don't have patience for it. I mean, and let me give you an example. For example, I just used a Mormon because I got into a fight with a Mormon recently. Probably you know him.
Yeah, Ben, right?
Bring it up, but I don't want to bring him up because
I'm good friends with him. So I mean,
okay, then I'll tell Ben. I do not take lessons on early Christianity from Mormons. Sorry, I don't. Joseph Smith's a fraud and a liar, and period. Okay. And I'm not having that conversation. So
we have to be able to coexist in the public sphere with Mormons.
That's correct. Because I've lived with
Catholics can't determine the bounds of public conversation.
Yeah, but I can determine the bounds of who I'll associate with, and if somebody's rude to me about my faith, I don't hang with them.
No, I
don't hang with people who are rude to me about my religion. And well, and I actually think more people should adopt that attitude. I don't have a problem with a Lutheran looking at me and saying I'm wrong. I don't have a problem with anybody looking at me and saying I'm wrong. But as long as they understand, you know, I have good friends who are Mormons. That's why I pulled that exam, and I've lived with Mormons. Mormon couple saved my life when I was homeless for a while.
But
That,
what should be the governing thing in the conversation, though, I guess, right?
I think going back to that thing, I'm going to respect that we have religious differences, and we're just going to not go there. We're going to acknowledge that the differences are there, and we're going to move on. I think that if you can maintain that attitude, it's helpful. But at the same time, there is a limit to so-called big tent philosophies. I mean, we do have. I get along great with Hindus. I get along great with neo-pagans. I get along great with most religious groups. And it all gets down to whether or not they can handle, look, we're just not going to argue. We're not going to insult each other. We're not going to argue. There is also, in my view,
we have to be able to have civil arguments, too, when they come up. Because arguments will come up, right?
Right.
Like, how are you not going to have a disagreement with, like, I don't know. I mean, like, that's the thing about Muslims, right? Like, there's no way I'm going to not have huge theological disagreements with Muslims. I'm happy to have that disagreement, and I'm not going to disown them for having it. That has to exist in some way.
On my journey away from atheism, one of the several of the people who were most helpful to me were actually Orthodox Jews, and very observant, pious Jews. Now, and they were people who helped me understand, and they were very welcoming, right? They're like, well, you found God, that's good. They have doubts about Christianity, but they were the type who took the attitude, well, you found God, that's good. Had some Muslim friends the same way.
But what I'm not understanding, though, Dean, is what arguments cause you to leave the conversation? Because that, in many ways, if you don't hang with people who have this disagreement, then how does it operate as a forum? I guess that's.
Well, I can tell you that I had very little trouble getting volunteers, and I've had very little trouble getting an audience growing. Even though if the project has only just started, there is anti-atheist sentiment out there, and I think there is anti-atheist suspicions out there about. And I think there are real criticisms to be made.
No, I'm not an atheist. I'm a huge critic of atheism myself. I'm just wondering how we form conversations in religious spaces that are open-minded, but don't suffer from essentially the proclamation that secularism needs to rule, right?
I'm not sure. Okay, I know the boundaries for me usually go to, who am I gonna ally with? I will ally with people who show respect for my faith and my faith tradition. And the minute I hear a scoff or a laugh or mocking or especially a historically false assertion, I mean, I'll probably give you one or two warnings, and then I'm done with you. And I really think that more religious people should have that attitude.
Well, I actually don't agree with any of that, but I really don't agree with the last statement, because people have any number of historically false things. I talk a lot about history, and I've never met a single person who I haven't had at least a minor historical disagreement with about any number of things.
Oh, sure. But when they simply when you correct somebody about the historical record and they will not accept that that's been corrected, again, it's usually I've had enough at that point. And you can have your own boundaries. But when I hear, for example, that the Catholic Church was a pro-Nazi organization during World War II, and I correct that information, and they scoff at me, I turn my back on them, and we're done, because I'm not going to sit there and listen to someone lie about my faith. I'm just not doing it, and I don't think anybody else should either. I don't think Mormons should.
They're not lying. They just, I mean,
No.
there are books that have been published on this, so they could have read those books, developed this understanding, and been completely sincere in this conception. But they had just been misinformed by dishonest or incorrect scholars.
When I give them references that they can go check for themselves, and they will not check them, or they scoff at them, really, I am done. And I got to tell you, people who have my attitude, we're growing. Are you familiar with Nicholas Taleb, the Black Swan fallacy guy?
Yeah, I read almost all of his books.
Yeah,
I am
you
a
should ask
huge
him.
fan of Nassim Nicholas Taleb.
Have you seen how he talks about atheists? He despises atheists. He's been known at parties, at cocktail parties, at publishing houses. Somebody announces they're atheist. He turns his back on them and won't talk to them anymore. And all I can say is, yay, I'm glad, because cultural atheism is not on decline where it matters. It's not on decline in our media elites, where you have, and it's definitely not on the decline in the universities, and it's not on the decline in sources like Wikipedia. So you can see atheists exerting ideological control like feminists in academia, in government. It doesn't matter that they're a small and even shrinking percentage of the population. If, like feminists, who are also a small and shrinking percentage of the population, if they have the reins of power in our education system and such, it doesn't really matter. And from what I can see, atheist assumptions about religion are now commonplace. I'm getting sick of atheists talking about science as if it is the alternative to religion, and speaking of religion as if it is definitionally irrational. In fact,
I don't disagree with you
there's more
on your
cultural
critique
Marxism.
of atheism. I'm just
There's
thinking it's
more
not
cultural
tactical.
Marxism.
What?
Well, but there's the cultural Marxism, that stupid belief that that religion is the opposite of rational, or that the religion is the opposite of science.
That's one
That's
element of
cultural
Marxism.
Marxist. Yeah, it's a Marxist. It's a cultural Marxist insertion into the
But
culture.
tactically, though, it doesn't seem. I mean, we're not in a position to. Religious people are not in a position to confront cultural. I've made this critique as Sargon. The amount of forces that are essentially highly progressive and highly secularized and essentially highly left-wing in society today are hard to underestimate. They only lose when they make a mistake.
And I think that what you're looking at, I actually think here's what happened. You had the YouTube atheist population. I don't dislike any of them personally. Hell, I'd have a beer with any of them if they wanted to. I just sit there and think, do I want these people as allies? No, because the minute that we win, they'll stab us in the back and they'll laugh at us. And that's what I truly think of most of the atheist population that's talking anti-SJW now. I believe most of the anti-SJW atheists will stab religious people in the back the second they
Stabbing
get
them in the back,
chance.
they don't have the capacity to stab me in the back because we're not in the same community together. I mean, like a Catholic could stab me in the back, but an atheist really can't because my back's not turned to him. I mean, for this particular fight, we are allied, and at the same time, I think commending the premises that really undergird religion and undergird this perspective of the Christian worldview and the Western worldview, because they are the same thing. The atheists who are fighting Marxism need to have a positive ideology. They're going to look to Westernism, and in the Western philosophy, they will find the premises of Christianity. And from there, it's a short jump to actually embracing the fullness of truth.
You may be right, and it may be that your approach is the approach some people need. From my perspective, I believe that atheism is the root problem. I really put the atheism before the Marxism, not after.
Really?
Yes, I do. In fact, yeah, I really do.
I think cultural Marxism is. I think atheism is the head of the Hydra.
I think that when you are an atheist, you are inevitably going to start looking to make heaven on earth, or just give up, right? So you're going to embrace some sort of ideological philosophy. Most go for leftism or some form of socialism. If they don't, they go for some kind of libertarianism. It's really noticeable what the atheist community is actually like. They're basically mostly atheists or socialists, libertarians or socialists. And since I'm neither,
there's lots of like libertarian atheists and stuff like that.
And I don't like libertarianism.
I mean,
I'm an ex-libertarian too. I mean, it was interesting. Sure. My libertarianism kind of went away with my atheism, but it's like libertarians too. I've had these conversations with libertarians, and what they all seem to believe is that it's possible to be neutral between religions. And you know what? You can't be. You cannot be neutral on the religious question, because that makes you neutral on the God question. And then no matter what system you have, you wind up what I would call your moral pragmatists, moral utilitarians almost always wind up winning, because what I think we've seen is that the cultural Marxists set in education and the news media and in Hollywood all injected basically atheistic assumptions into the culture, and
Well, what can you
and
name those
materialism,
assumptions?
materialism
Materialism.
for the for the win, whether it's economic materialism or even biological materialism. People
Very
now
different
refer to.
concept. Yes.
I don't think they're different at all, because I think once you're a philosophical materialist, you will become an economic materialist probably. I think one leads straight into the other. I really think that. I think it all stems from the atheism. I think Ayn Rand objectivism. I think general libertarianism. I think socialism. All are rooted in atheism, because all are rooted in the assumption that society or human beings can be perfected in some way. They'll all deny it, but ultimately it's what they're trying to do, and they're trying to be neutral on moral questions. And at some level, there's only so long you can do that. Um, so
Hmm.
you would probably
But
call us on the Escaping Atheist set, and some of the people, you would probably call us, Christian reactionaries. In fact, there's a hashtag where you'll find some of us. Hashtag CRX does stand for Christian reactionary. We can
well, when I
we
think of
question the
Christian
whole
reaction, I think of the alt-right, which I mean, I think this is. I think we've kind of beat this topic of approach. We've made that clear where we differ. But the other thing I think is, I think that the new atheist identity is dying, and I
Yeah,
think
I don't
that
think so at all.
I think that the alt-right and identitarian entities are on the rise in a big way,
They are.
and I
Um,
think that I mean, to tell you the truth, I actually saw a alt-right video where you were talking about the clone instant, and such.
Oh, that
And
was
so,
with Mr. Medicare. That really, I hope I get to talk to him again one day. That was a terrible conversation. I came off poorly, but he was also jumping all over me. I
but
generally,
my only point was that the alt-right is a force that people need to start thinking about as an actual force in American politics and in the intellectual space of the internet.
oh, I
And
agree.
understanding exactly, and if you're going to be reactionary, if you're going to do this, then people have to understand where the relationship begins and ends. And
Most of us who consider ourselves Christian reactionary have a jaundiced view of the alt right, because although they have embraced, I've noticed recently, thanks to the influence of Vox Day and some other, they've embraced Christianity, although it's mostly a Protestant strain, I guess you'd call it, that they respect. Um,
well, I mean,
a
I
lot of
don't
us,
care if
I'm
they
very
respect me. I mean, I'm glad that I know a lot of alt writers that are Catholic, but I don't think that's
yes.
I think the salient issue is exactly their ideology, right? I mean, uh,
Well, I think
they're
some Catholics who are in the alt-right need to have a more jaundiced view of the alt-right, because there's a strong anti-Catholic streak in a lot of alt-righters, and it's good to notice that, because I sure have. I don't consider myself
you
alt-right.
don't. I think the most salient feature is the racialist angle with the alt right. That's what I noticed
Yes,
the first. I don't notice anti-Catholicism first and foremost when looking at the alt right.
you'll see it if you look. You'll see it if you look.
Well, no, but that's not the. I mean,
Yeah.
the media. I talked to a Catholic. I've talked to several Catholic alt writers, although I've only recorded one conversation. The first thing that comes up is they're committing an ethnostate, and the Catholic Church. I don't know how we're supposed to integrate that into a Christian community that's multiracial. You know,
You, um, that's an
and
interesting conversation to have, and I'd like to have it, because here's where I'm at on that. I can tell you honestly, there's nothing inherently wrong with people wanting to divide themselves up ethnically. There really
mhm.
isn't. Even Malcolm X observed this. Who's
Well, he
that
wanted an
people.
ethnostate, so I'm sure he was quite a fan of that, right?
Right, exactly. There's reasons an ethno state can't work, but I have to admit
Yes.
that what I have had to admit, because it's very important to me. See, I hate the social justice left, because they've ruined good words like racism. To me, racism from the Christian sense is just a no-brainer. You don't hate people based on their race, and you don't oppress people based on their race. as much as I hate to admit it, though, we have to look at it and say, listen, young whites are being discriminated against now. It's a thing. So I remember when the whole art rights thing started, it bugged me because I saw the racialism, but I've also seen now what they're doing to lower class, working class whites in the United States, and I'm sorry, systemic racial discrimination against whites is now a thing. So I can't. So from that
But
perspective,
what do you
what I
mean by
thought,
that? Can I ask? Everyone always talks about systemic racial oppression and
literal quotas, limiting, you know,
this would
quotas.
fall more heavily on Asians. Just but
Good
yeah,
for
I
them.
know.
I don't really much care. The fact is that young whites in particular are being discriminated against, and young white males more so than others. And we can go over the statistics in any particular area you want, but I mean, even whether it's the education system, the employment system, or anything else, discrimination
But
against whites and males is now normal and
but
codified under law.
I think that but this gets to the point. I don't think that like having a particular racial grievance is a new thing. But what's so odd about it now is that the political parties themselves have ceased to sort of commend a liberal order of essentially not examining race, and have advocated essentially, political orders that say that we're going to explicitly work for your race's interest.
And
And
it
the Republican Party
sickens
hasn't done
me.
that yet, but the Democratic Party is pretty much there.
It sickens me, but what I think, honestly, is that the development of white identity and white identity politics, it makes me want to vomit, but I have to say, I think it's going to be a necessary thing.
You think it's
And
going to
I've
scare
given
them
in to,
straight?
pretty much, it has to happen, because you can't have everybody in the, basically we are going to be outnumbered at some point as white people. You can't have everybody blaming whites, and that not eventually be a problem. I mean, race hate is
Yeah,
race hate.
that's a point.
Race hate is race hate, and if people and people are going to have to defend themselves, because they just have to. It's why I got into the men's rights thing. It's not because the idea of men's rights is a particularly good idea. In fact, it's rather ludicrous in a lot of ways. But when you have one group pushing for one set of rights, someone's got to push back. They really do, and
The, I
that's
think
what I
though
see
that
here.
I think that if we're talking about the Christian role in this, it's
Yeah.
got to be coming after the storm of the alt-right and presenting an alternative, a common way of socially living ethically that's not identitarian and that is ethical, that focuses on virtue, and then using that to essentially
I tend to agree with you, although I have to admit I've turned very reactionary. I've turned so reactionary, I'm no longer convinced allowing people to vote is a good idea. That's how reactionary I've turned. I'm not sure I believe in democracy itself anymore.
I think
Um,
that's a natural effect that we've seen internet wide.
yeah,
I think that, and I don't think it comes from. I think the fact of the matter is, no, it comes from. It comes from the fact that I don't trust the progressives anymore.
yeah.
Right? Like,
I
I
don't
mean, this
even.
is. I've asked myself this before, and I'm getting off topic, but I'm just going to go on my own thing. The reason why not being libertarian or being sort of libertarianish, but obviously not in any formal sense. I mean, there's some things I think the Democrats might have a good idea on, but the fundamental fact is I just don't trust them in power, because I think the second they get consolidation over this body, they're going to use it to essentially force absolutely illiberal principles upon the Catholic Church and religious believers, and
Oh yeah,
especially
absolutely.
on people who are pro-lifers. They're going to treat pro-lifers like they're trying now to treat people who are against gay marriage, and that I just don't trust them. So how is there supposed to be compromise? And that's what's creating this big reactionary wave that we're all sort of seeing build up online. Uh,
That's right.
but this reactionary wave, before we go all praising the reactionary Hail Keck and all this stuff, this is incredibly dangerous.
I know it is.
It's not like, oh, it's all fun when you're the one who's reacting and like suddenly you're the one that can go further right than anyone else, and because you're so far right, like no one can touch you, right? Because you don't share any premises in common, and you can only argue with someone when there are premises in common. That's all good and well until you see absolutely terrifying movements form to your right, and you've got no way of pushing back against them.
I tend to agree. I think that, and maybe you're worried that we're creating something more extreme on our end. I'm not sure we are, but
I don't think you are or I am. I'm looking at people like Richard Spencer.
what I really truly believe, and I really literally believe that any society that is not rooted in a strong foundation and an idea of God is not a society I want to be in, because it's a dangerous society. And I actually do believe cultural atheism is the root problem. So it's one of the reasons why when somebody tells me they want to be my atheist ally, I'm like, really? Okay, here's the hoops you have to jump through to be my atheist ally. Praise the Catholic Church high and low. And tell me you have full respect for religious views that you don't agree with, including my own. Tell me you
Okay,
respect
I
them.
was going to say something, but I got
And
sidetracked by that. But that you're
yeah,
putting the cart before the horse.
no, I'm not.
You can't. My purpose as a thinker is to get people to understand the positive role that Christian, Catholic, and Western ideas have played in thought. If you take your approach, then how are you going to convert anybody? I mean, you're already assuming what you're trying to prove, right?
Here's
It's like
the thing. I'm not trying to convert anybody to Christianity. Really, I'm not trying to convert anybody to Christianity. I am trying to exert zero tolerance for religious bigotry toward me and my Christian brothers. I have zero tolerance for it. Especially, I mean, I've said this before and I'll repeat it. There was a time
you
where
want more like an Anti-Defamation League for Christians.
if you want, I mean, although we don't, not all Christians are good people, and there are strains of Christianity I have real problems with. I think the Ralph
That's
Reed
where I was
strain of
going next,
Christianity,
actually.
I think the Ralph Reed strain of Christianity did a lot of damage. I actually,
but that's exactly where I was going next, right? Because if atheism is indeed the root cause of Marxism, which I think is just one tendril of it, then why are there all of these super Marxist versions of Christianity and super I don't want to be too I mean incredibly
you mean
to
religious
borrow
leftists?
totally heretical versions of Christianity to be not to put too fine a point on it. Uh, that seems to have a hard time being explained under the theory that atheism is the root of all of these problems, I guess.
I think that when you're, here's what I see, and this is coming from as an ex-atheist, someone who is very big in politics, left and right for a long time. I'm trying to get out of politics, to be honest. I genuinely believe once you're atheist, you either turn nihilist or you start trying to build heaven on earth. And once you start trying to build heaven on earth, you get into politics. And so you're usually either going to go left or you're going to go right. If you go left, you're going to go Marxist. If you go right, you're going to go libertarian, probably. And what I keep seeing over and over again from these people is a complete lack of respect for religiosity and a tolerance for disrespect for it. And it's and what I keep seeing is hailing people as brave for shitting on Christians, and hailing people as brave for telling the brave atheist truth that there is no God and science rules and evolution bitches and Big Bang Theory and all this stuff they say, which is nonsense.
I'm reading the chat, and Ben has a question that I want to slightly modify. If we're creating some kind of Christian Anti-Defamation League, which is, I guess, if we admit that, then we have to admit that you're doing a fundamentally different project than what I'm doing, which is a place for conversation. But let's just say that we are. And the prerequisite for entering a brotherhood like this is to praise to high heaven the Catholic Church.
Not the Catholic Church in particular, but I mean, but go ahead, yeah.
But it seems to me that in that case, we're kind of. I mean, if I was doing the same thing, and it was a Protestant organization, and they're like, oh, praise to the high heavens, John Calvin. I'm not so sure I would.
I would have trouble praising John Calvin, but I could praise Protestantism and good things I know about Presbyterians and good things I know that Calvinists have accomplished. I can talk to you about Lutheran heroes in history. On the Escaping Atheism team, there's 2 Catholics, 2 Eastern Orthodox, and an Anglican. We're not just all Catholics. That's why I don't even want to make it about Catholics, except I would have said I need to see respect first before I'm taking you as an ally, because otherwise I'm not giving it. I could tell you nice things about Mormons. I could talk to you an hour nice things about Mormons. I really could.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be coming in the same spirit of, all right, we're going to try and respect each other. We're going to try and have no-go areas where we know we're not going to argue. Or we know it's not going to be profitable for us to argue, and that tends to work. This is why, even though I'm critical of evangelical Christianity, I do have evangelical friends. But a certain base respect has to be the starting point. Otherwise, I don't have time for it.
But
that's how I see it.
No, I guess, I mean, to me though, like, I mean, this is a thing that's really big in Islam. This whole like respect thing, right? Like, you have to respect the religion, respect the religion. That demand for respect makes me want to respect it less.
Okay.
Like, I have some Muslim friends who are not Salafists,
but what's respect in your view?
Let me finish this point first, just to put some color into this before I let you push back. I mean, I think anyone who's ever had like Muslim friends who are like very much part of the home country rather than like Western culture, knows the sort of sensation where you have to you're obliged to say good things about Islam, which they're not obliged to reciprocate with. And it literally eats away your respect for the religion. It makes the religion seem insecure. It makes the religion seem like it can't meet people on neutral ground. It basically has to be wooed. I'll give you another example. SJWs are like this too. I was trying to get into a debate with this Garrett guy, you see him on Christy Winter's channel all the time. And he essentially made a prerequisite for me to get into a conversation with him. That I literally have this wonderful opinion about progressives and hard leftists before I even got into the conversation with them. I mean, I can pretend to have that, but it actually undermines the respect I have, the demand for that.
It depends on what you mean by respect. Okay. Lack of disrespect, it may be the way you better call it. You might want to call it. A lot of this came from, because I see, again, I'm going to mention the concept of atheist bullies. And atheist bullying. Having been bullied by atheists and having watched them bully other religious people and have them laugh about it and say, get over it, my answer is no, I'm not getting over it. My answer is, what I view again, I 100% believe atheism is the root of feminism, is the root of Marxism, is the root of libertarianism, is the root of objectivism, and is the root of other political philosophies which all claim to be neutral on religion. That means they're neutral on God. That means they're functionally atheist. And they all suffer as a result of it. I stand with John Stuart Mill and Edmund Burke and Cicero and others in saying that atheism is toxic, period. No matter what your religion is, most people should see that atheism is toxic and dangerous. And I stand by those. Who's my audience? Anybody who agrees. And is sick of the atheist influence on our culture, which, unlike you, I think is huge. Materialist assumptions are built into everything.
We're hosting an ultimatum onto people that we're not prepared to reciprocate.
What ultimatum is there? What ultimatum
the ultimatum
is there?
Essentially for a community that you're describing is one where we say that prior to entry, people praise Christianity
praise. Okay, no praise involved.
So respect Christianity, but
please, no eyes, please. Or let's back away the other way. Atheists talk a good game, and they do. Don't tell me they're not organized. They are. They have their own logos. They have their own get-togethers. They have their own bullshit.
They're essentially, functionally a religion.
They put out commercials. They put out commercials, for God's sake. For no God's sake.
No, I'm not defending atheism. I'm just. I'm comparing approaches.
I remember literally having people say some of the nastiest shit to my face, and me just deciding I'll take it and ignore it. But I started realizing there's other people like this. There's another guy you might want to interview sometime. Have you seen the Deflating Atheism channel?
Oh yeah, we have something that we might schedule for later. I'm in conversation with him.
He and I are big mutual fans, and
Okay.
he and I have the same attitude, which is that no, atheism is hateful and toxic, and we want it to go away. I mean, literally, I want to strangle it in the crib. I despise atheism just that much at this point, and I think it is a more dangerous cultural force than Islam is. And so that's really what I think. I think atheists are a bigger threat than Muslims are. Go ahead. I can't wait to hear all the people laughing at that. But you know what? Scientifically,
no, I'm not so sure that's correct.
It is going to be mocked. But I will stand by it. When you see atheists get power, what they usually do is mayhem worse than the worst. I mean, ISIS level is piker compared to what atheists are capable of when they get power.
Marxists.
And this is because you say Marxist. I will not give you the Marxist writer out. No, atheists. Okay, and I use Hitler as my favorite example because it's not just communists. It's not just Marxists. Whatever you think of Hitler, why does every atheist try and tell you that Hitler was a Christian? They all do that. They get it out of their forums.
I'd never participated in a debate on that front. I thought it was inscrutable.
No, it's not at all inscrutable. I'll tell you the truth. Hitler started out as a Christian, saying he was a Christian. He was baptized Catholic. He had a somewhat religious home. Not very, from what we know. He claimed to broadly be a Christian when he was running for political power. By the 1940s, where everybody uniform agrees he was insane, he had kicked every Christian out of his government, and he had nothing but atheists and occultists working for him during the last 5 years of his reign, during the years when even people who were Hitler fans wanted to kill him. So and I will give you a reference to a book by Vox Day, a Protestant who's very critical of Catholics, by the way, but Vox Day's book, The Irrational Atheist, he puts this together, and you can find more of it too. Okay, look at all the mayhem in history. All religions put together, maybe 1 or 2%. Islam, maybe 3 or 4%. Atheists, 95% of genocide and huge wars. It's no contest. When people have no respect for faith, when they have no respect for even the idea of God, they're dangerous as fuck, and I don't trust them. I don't trust them as friends. I don't trust them as allies. Does that mean I have no atheist friends?
I think we were describing are nihilists, Marxists,
they're crazy,
and sociopaths.
Yeah.
I don't think that Marxism, nihilism, cynicism, and sociopathy are probably all highly correlated with atheism. But when I see people like Joan Head and Armored Skeptic, I don't see any of that. I see people who are just deists who are copying a cultural affectation called New Atheism, but are not themselves do not participate in those very, very dangerous and highly poisonous aspects.
Well, no, but what I believe about those folks is that they'll go along with it just fine, and they won't argue unless their own ox is gored.
But wouldn't their conflict with the SJWs and the Marxists count against that hypothesis? Because we know that there are things that they won't go along with.
It was one of the reasons I changed my mind on that, because I used to think that way. Oh well, they're atheists, but they're on our side. What I find is that no, they're interested in their issues, and they will come to the defense of others. I think the one that was most clear was when I tried to. I know specific examples of atheists who've grouped up to gang bully people online and either drive them offline by doxing them, calling them, threatening them, one guy called and threatened his wife, going to their books on people. Let me finish, because going to their books on places like Goodreads and Amazon and downvoting them, just so that they would get less attention. have their sales hurt for criticizing atheism. They run in packs. They do this. Students online working for Marxist professors get credit to inject atheist assertions into Wikipedia and to go out and try and proselytize and convert people online. We've caught some of them doing it. Okay, so it's organized activity to convert people to atheism. Some of them have shown up on our website to do the same thing.
Don't we know that these kind of bullying mobs can form without organized effort? Because this was always the complaint of the.
Of course they can.
Okay, but
they're happening.
The corollary would be that we do not know it's organized just because there are people who bully people online, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So okay, I'm not quite sure what your point is, except that here's what I keep finding. I mean, like in China, it's basically anybody who's religious is not treated well in society. And I want to make it okay for people to say they're not atheists. And what I've discovered and what others who've communicated with me have discovered is being not an atheist will get you ostracized. It may harm your career in academia. It may harm your career in other areas. It may lose your friends. And yet we have this atheist identity that's out there with people who constantly portray themselves as victims. And I'm going to go ahead and even name big name atheists who pretend they're victims, like Noel Plum and TJ Kirk. They're the professional victim atheist. I have no tolerance for it. I really don't. I'm sick of it. It's more, to me, it is coming from the same root as SJWism. When I start hearing the litany of the victim atheist, which I hear regularly, I hear exactly the same litany that I hear out of feminists, exactly the same litany that I hear out of the racialists. When they start blaming religion.
Okay, but here's okay. Oh, let me know when you're.
Well, when the bottom line is the scapegoating and blaming of religion is to me as dangerous and disturbing as overt racism. In fact, if you look at history, people who hate for religious reasons are more dangerous than people who hate for race reasons. You know, you can be a racist and hate somebody for their race, but still business with them, or just say, well, I'm going to leave them alone. But something about religious hate drives so much more. And someone's going to say, well, you're driving hatred of atheism. No, I'm reacting to atheist hate. So what we're doing is specifically aping the behavior of well-known atheists. So that's the bottom line.
This is the problem. This is the problem, right? Like your solution to essentially like rabid identitarian politics, which, by the way, identitarian politics breeds bullying. Every bully thinks he's reacting to another bully. Right. The thing is, we can't keep on doing this as a country. Like the identity politics breeds more identity politics. Reaction breeds reaction, and like it's going to feel really good to be a reactionary until you find the reaction because once people start reacting, they no longer talk to each other. And if you no longer talk to each other, ethics don't matter. You know, conversation doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is the reaction. You're pushing back. You're hitting back against the bully, right? But you know that will feed into a feedback loop, and we're not going to like form up. I mean, even now, like Marxists are the most powerful organization in this country.
They're terrifying.
Yeah. So the idea that we're going to form an identity politics group, and then we're just going to out identity politics the left, or we're going to out react the left, or we're going to out bully the left, seems to me to be first of all, it could potentially feed into a massive right-wing reaction movement that's beyond anyone's control, and which could be horrifyingly destructive. Second of all, it's very unlikely to succeed because they're already more powerful. And the only thing you're appealing to with a reaction is that, well, we're going to do the same thing back to them, but we're going to be more powerful. Hitting back twice as hard only makes sense if you can hit back twice as hard.
If you, we had a little conversation about this. If you read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals,
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes.
God, you can talk about them for hours. You really can. And there's so much to be said about them. Most people who read about them don't know them. There's fake versions running around. A lot of them are filled with commentary. But if you read the straight up rules, they're very good look at exactly how I actually contend that they're like the art of war for democracies, right? They're how small groups without a lot of power or
Machiavelli,
resources can,
yes.
yes, Machiavelli for the democratic age. And the fact is that the current culture, as I analyze it, has moved away from one in which virtue is accumulated by doing good, or where virtue comes from altruism, and is now either more about victim status or who's more powerful. It's kind of the
That's a
nature.
bad thing.
It
That's the
is a
thing that
terrible
we're.
thing. It is a terrible thing. And I'll mention SJW is always lie by Vox Day again, because he observed something, and he was quoting Aristotle on this. Aristotle on why democracy is a bad idea, by the way. He said that basically although there's more there's more points to it than this, that basically the two broad ways that you can have a conversation are dialectic and rhetoric. And from that perspective, Dave, I think it's what you want is dialectic. You want rational conversation. You want people to be reasonable. You want them to be bringing facts and logic to the table. And one of the things I found both in my fight against feminism, which, by the way, I'm a very effective anti-feminist warrior, is that now I forgot what I was about to say about that.
Well, what we're talking about right now is that
Rhetoric.
how the use of these reactionary rules essentially is fueling the fire that we seek to fight. I mean, I'm looking at the rules of radicals, and some of them are damn good ideas, but some of them are just flatly unethical.
I know. In fact, that's the problem with the rules for radical, is that there's no moral core to them. So that you can use the rules for radical anything, right? I mean, a lot of them is. I mean, if you look at the rules for radical, they're all sensible, and they're all reasonable. I mean, in fact, some of it is obvious. If your people aren't having fun, then they're going to stop doing whatever they're going to do. I mean, the whole of Gamergate ran on these rules for radicals without even knowing it. It was really funny watching it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, this is how you do modern
and this is actually how the rules for radical are actually how the alt-right operates, which some of them will probably, if they hear me say that, will get angry, but it's how they operate.
But that's not my point. Is not that these things aren't effective. My point is, the problem is not that these things are effective. The point is, sure, they're effective, but when you do them, the trust in society goes down. And if both sides use these, you're going to tear society apart.
And if neither side uses, only one side uses them, the side that uses them wins. And so to go back to what I was saying about rhetoric, Aristotle thought that the vast majority of men weren't even capable of dialectic, that they could only handle rhetoric. I begin to think he is correct. What happened? I'll tell you that for me, 5 years ago, I set out to poison the name of feminism in the popular culture when I was doing work at A Voice for Men. I'm going to call that a win. And I'm going to say right now, I wish to poison the name of atheism. I wish the average person on the street would be ashamed to call themselves an atheist, because it's a terrible thing to be an atheist.
We're getting far afield here. I mean,
well, so because are you asking me what is it I want to do? I want to change the Overton window. I want to make it to be people look at you funny if you announce that you're an atheist, and that they pick on you and that you feel bad. That's what I
need a whole video on how Overton windows shift through culture.
Yes.
But the video ended with this idea that if you hijack cultural mechanisms like this for the purposes of trying to change political Overton windows, you're going to destroy your society.
How is society not already on the brink of destruction?
It is on the brink of destruction. But I don't think it's Christianity's job to destroy it. I think it's Christianity's job to build a new society. And that new society has got to be built on openness and honesty, which is why I think that if you're going to start a conversation, I mean, the alt-right and the feminists will destroy society if they are left to go by themselves, because they're going to be cashing these rules for radicals. They're going to be mocking. They're going to be spitballing. They're going to be fighting their way into the grave of this civilization. But the task before us is to build some space where something actually positive can thrive, not to be participants in a moral leapfrog to hell.
The one of the things that interests me, if you familiarize yourself with Rod Dreher and
oh yeah,
American and the Benedict option.
Yes, I've
I'm a big fan of that. See, I believe current secular society is flat out evil. I mean,
Mhm.
literally, and I'm not being rhetorical. That's literal. I believe current society is
Sure.
evil.
There are a lot of evil. I mean, it's abortion kills millions of people a year, and society promotes it. So
We we
that's
we're
evil
we're
right
we're,
there, right?
we're not even talking. Yeah, we're killing them on the other end in our nursing homes too, which almost nobody talked about. They're horrible places. The
Mm.
education system's a
So we
disaster.
agree on that, right?
Yeah, we agree on all of that. And so the question is, where are we taking society next? And I don't know. I do think that what's going to happen is that Christian groups and others, a lot of us are going to withdraw and start making more, you know, Catholic-only communities or Lutheran-only communities or whatever. I mean, that's already happening with some places. I don't know if you're aware of the mega church cultural phenomenon, but this is where you'll have a church which may have 500,000 members,
Yeah,
all
but
living in an
can it
extensive
sustain? That's
community.
the thing.
Well, they apparently can. They run like condo associations. And I'm not
That's
saying
not
that's
that's not
even,
the critic. That's not the weak link. The weak link is education.
and I'm not even saying it's a good thing. I actually think it's a bad thing when millions of people withdraw from the mainstream society. But I do have a big streak in me that says, yeah, I'd like to watch mainstream society burn, because the level of respect I have for this culture now is almost zero. I wish
Well,
I didn't live here.
the job of Christianity is to build the culture that you do have respect for.
That's true.
The
It is
outside
true.
world is going to be evil, right? Especially if we've gone as far as we have with a lot of things. But I think that's the message that is actually going to get us through this. It's going to be spaces on the internet where we're not like "f you," whoever is the latest opponent. It's actually showing what the way forward is. Showing,
I think that we can get
showing
there.
the contrast.
I actually think that we can somewhat get there, but I sort of wonder. I go back to Aristotle thought the great majority of men could not handle rational conversation, could only be moved by rhetoric, and that this,
I agree
amongst
with
other
that,
things,
by the way.
was why democracy was a bad idea. And I can't disagree anymore, right? And so it's like,
I don't think this is an aside. I don't think that human beings are swayed by arguments. I actually have a video on that, but that does not make
it's why you're
democracy a
right about
bad thing.
narratives. It's why you're
But
right about narratives. You made a real good video on narratives,
oh,
and you
thank you, thank you.
in fact, I think you're right on most things when I listen to you. It's kind of funny. So I know I make you uncomfortable because I have a very, the Escaping Atheism team has a very confrontational style. The only thing I'll tell you about that is we chose it, and we're
Oh no,
conscious
that's
of it,
fine.
and we're willing to take feedback from people who are honestly saying, you know what, you went too far that time. But here's what, if you look at the way marketing even works these days, offending people is the way you do it.
Yeah,
I
that's how
don't have to
Ghostbusters
like it.
got their marketing done for them.
Well, they offended the wrong way, and that's the problem. See, because they're pushing down. Ironically enough,
I think didn't it work for them or did it not work? I guess it didn't work.
the Ghostbusters movie, huge flop,
Oh,
um,
okay.
and that's because they tried to seeing it, and that's not going to work. That's never going to work. But like you, I see the cultural Marxism as the issue. I believe the cultural Marxism in Hollywood is the issue. I believe cultural Marxism in education is the issue. Guess what? That stuff's going into K through 12 now. I don't know if you know it or not, but
Sure.
social justice is
That
going
is,
into public school
no,
curriculums.
I've seen it. I've seen it. Education is the battle. That is the battle that we fight as online people who talk about ideas. It is education. That's
Okay,
where it
so let me
begins. That's where it ends.
tell you what I think of the. And we're probably not going to agree because let's just agree you don't like my style, and you don't have to. And I'm not even offended that you don't like my
We
style.
have
It's
different,
okay.
very different styles.
It's
I
totally
am a,
okay. It's
yeah,
totally
sure,
okay not to
sure.
appreciate my style. It's okay. So don't go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, okay. What was the point you're gonna make?
Um, I think all styles are needed. I really
Okay.
do. I mean, I'm going to give it to you this way. I even remember growing up, not Catholic. I did not grow up Catholic, but
Mhm.
listening to fire and brimstone preachers. When even if you read the Bible, you know what? You can read St. Paul or St. Augustine, for that matter, who's not in the Bible, right? But he's St. Augustine, and you cannot hear the dripping sarcasm, the mocking, that some of these great classic Christian writers would use. You have a tin ear, right? I mean, as Christians, as especially ones rooted in history, which any good Catholic should be, also the Eastern Orthodox and those. I'm sorry, sarcasm, metaphor, simile, mocking. All of these are to be found in the Bible. All of these are found in some of the greatest Christian leaders in history, and other religions too. Of biting, withering sarcasm and disapproval and moral condemnation. Those are all tools we're free to use, and I don't mind using them.
Oh
I
yeah, I'm
do
just
think I think
wondering.
I think
Yeah.
the I think any society which has no respect for the sacred or no concept of the sacred, that's what gets you the culture of death. That's what gets you this materialist culture that we live in, where whether it's economic or otherwise, we measure everything by our consumer spending habits, and we measure virtue by how beautiful you are, or how bulked you are, or how much money you make.
But
It's
we're not disagreeing here. What we're I think there's both a tactical and moral dimension that when you use these weapons, you're they're very double-edged swords.
they are, they are.
And the thing is that I mean, are people? I mean, I've talked to these alt-right people. Are they aware of the kind of world that exists in the society that is collapsing? I don't know if people really understand what they're asking for here. This is not a fun thing. It's not fun
No,
to watch a society burn. It's not
no, it's really
fun
not.
to watch a
It's
society ethnically partition itself. It's almost always bloody when society is as integrated as it is right now.
Yeah, I've never been more pessimistic about the future of the country. I mean, I've never been more pessimistic. I probably have a somewhat more positive view of the alt-right than you do, although only in the sense of I view them as having been an inevitability. It was
I
going,
think they're not.
white identity politics were inevitable.
Oh no, I agree with that. That's
And
the part I agree with. I
and
see I see the alt-right like I see them as potential converts, like I see all interlocutors online. Uh, but uh, what I'm saying is the purpose of the witness should be to provide hope.
one of the things that also matters to me, and I'm just going to give this to you. If
Sure.
serious-minded religious people have specific things they want to point to and say, you said this here, I want to talk to you about that, I'm always going to listen.
Hmm.
We'll always listen on the Escaping Atheism team. So you
Okay.
said fuck off to somebody and you really hurt their feelings because you didn't hear them. We'll always listen to that. At the same time, use of salty language, coarse language, we're going to be using it, and we're going to be completely aping the likes of Penn Jillette and Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett and Jerry Coyne and all of these atheists in the popular media. We're going to talk just like them. And we're going to do it all the time, and we're going to know that it bothers them that we do this. And every time they complain, and this is the thing that we always respond with, when we say something like, really, I wouldn't ever want my kid to date an atheist, which, by the way, happens to be true. I wouldn't.
Hmm.
And which is my right to feel that way, I hope you know.
I'm not saying it isn't.
Yeah, yeah. The point is now I'm starting to want to ramble.
You were going to say something about
When they
hope
say
because that
something
was
like
the one
that's
I ended
offensive,
on.
when they say this is offensive, or why are you being such a jerk, and I will respond with a classic quote from Christopher Hitchens, or Stephen Fry, or Daniel Dennett, or Sam Harris, or any of those people, which all basically say the same thing. Who cares if you're offended?
But
You know.
that is. I mean, to a certain degree, I agree. In intellectual conversation, who cares if you're offended? But if we're in a society where offense is totally dismissed, we're again taking those steps down and down and down and down until we don't. The bonds that hold society together are obliterated. Uh, this is not going to be fun when we hit rock bottom with this. We're going to have a society where nobody has each other's back.
Well, let me ask you this. I just told you that Nicholas Taleb, the Black Swan guy, literally at cocktail parties for publishing houses in New York, turns his back on atheists when he doesn't insult them to their faces. I consider him a hero for that. What do you think?
Well, I consider him a great thinker, but not for that particular reason.
Okay, I think that we're in a position in society now, and in other countries, in places like China, where really no, um, atheists must stop pretending they are the default rational ones in every conversation, and they must, in my view, if you're going to stay atheist, develop at least seriously some circumspection, some reasonable respect. And I don't mean I demand that you make a list of things you like about my religion, but how about you just not lie about my religion? How about you not start
Mm.
conversations with me talking about sky fairies? I literally when I was doing some online work had complete strangers walk up to me. This was before I started talking about religion, right? All I did was mention I was Christian or Catholic. Complete strangers work doing anti-feminist work, letting me know they strongly disapproved of my religious views, which I hadn't even articulated except to say I was Christian. And they were Sam Harris fans. And at some point, when you have enough encounters like that, you start deciding, no, you do need to push back. You know what? If I find out someone's a Sam Harris fan, I start mocking them. Because they're following a cult leader anyway. He's the most irrational of all the online atheists of all the atheists in the pop media that I can see. Sam Harris is the
But
worst.
this is not. I'm not. We're not address. I feel like
We're
we've
not
not
addressing
addressed
the
this.
issue.
We're not addressing the fact that we're driving society into oblivion as opposed to providing hope. Our job shouldn't be, oh hey, society is effed. Let's eff it more because they
Okay.
started it. And in some sense, that's correct because I think that cultural Marxism was in some ways an intentional way to drive society to rock bottom. But that's not the role of the Christian in society is not to drive a society going to hell that much further. It's to take society, turn its head, and go, "Hey, remember when we did this? Remember when we had rational conversations? Remember when there were saints? Remember then when there was respect?
Well,
And wasn't that better? Wasn't that doesn't that feel better?"
I guess I have to agree that I would rather be in that society, but I disagree that we can get there by always being nice.
You don't
Sometimes
think
you got to
that you
be
don't
around.
think atheists want to you don't think atheists like living saints. You don't think atheists feel transcendence. Uh,
I have no idea. Well,
they feel everyone feels this transcendent pull to the divine, to the good.
what
Uh,
what you've done though when you've embraced the atheism as your identity, which is what these guys are doing, is you have declared straight up there's nothing sacred, there's no such thing as sacred or profane, and they all of them, all of everyone I've named makes a virtue out of that. And so this is one of the reasons why I see the atheism as a toxic. I think it's cultural acid
but it's not
in all of it, and I
sufficient in this. But here's the thing, Dean. Uh, I'm not an atheist. I don't
I
particularly
know.
fan of atheism, but it's not sufficient to indict atheism to then commend essentially the mirror of atheism's role for the Christian community.
Well,
Atheists could do this, and atheism can and probably is driving the society to hell. But it's not our job to. It's not our job to blast ice to ice to do an ice blast onto the atheist's fire blast and mutually obliterate what's before us. Our job is to provide the voice of hope and remembrance in the society.
that's one thing that's for sure is that's one of the most indispensable roles of the institutional church, which is an issue I take with evangelicals and other religious too, which is that the institutional church, and here I will include Protestants, okay, at least the ones who are still, the ones who are serious, the Lutherans and those that are keeping, some kind of continuity going. One of the great roles of the institutional church is remembering the history. And
Yeah.
one of the things the cultural Marxist set's done, and this is endemic within atheism, is made out that organized religion is the worst kind.
But
And
do you
you'll
ever
find
see an
that
atheist
sentiment
who
all the time.
remembers, who sees something like, do you know, like, when you see like Christopher Hitchens or whatever, and he remembers that Michelangelo was a devout Catholic, or you see, an atheist, and they remember uh, that moral realism was a Christian project, and there was a time before that was a principle.
Yeah.
There are these moments. That's the moment that we should be looking for. The moments that say, maybe you think you're an atheist, but isn't this worth more than what you're currently fighting for? Isn't this concept of goodness, truth, and beauty, more than just the materialism that you have in front of you?
I think that you're correct. I want you to be out there making those arguments. I'm not going to be the guy making them. I'm really not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and I do think there is a real need for multiple approaches. I can tell you a lot of this is based on my personal experience. Like back around 2010, I got involved in the fight against feminism. And for the
Mm-hmm.
longest time, what I found in the fight against feminism is that, and a lot of my seasoned veterans who were with me got sick of it, right? Because I would try and be nice with feminists, and I would try and reason with feminists,
Mm-hmm.
and I would try and debate with feminists, and it would always blow up in my face because there is no arguing with a feminist. There
Mm-hmm.
really isn't. And so, and I do feel the same way about cultural atheism. And I don't think, unlike you, I don't think it's waning. I think it's the main enemy we face. I think it is the root of the social justice. So this probably comes to the whole, this is where the difference is between us, because I can tell just talking and listening to your videos, there's very little we disagree on.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and I can cite history, I can cite scripture, and I can cite history that no, being rude, snotty, sarcastic, we have these weapons. It's a question of when to use them and when not to.
Yeah, and I'm pointing out the specific danger of using them right now.
Well, what is it you think is going to happen?
Complete collapse of societal trust, then whatever that brings about, which is probably going to be actual economic and ordered societal collapse.
I'm scared of the same thing. And we probably just think that what's going to cause it to collapse is different. I think
Mm.
people who are defending the traditional Western way of life, which by the way includes a deep reverence for God and religious institutions, even if you're not religion, the Western way of life has always reverenced religious thinking and reverenced God. Even people who
Yeah, it
never went to
certainly has.
school. Yeah. And if you're not down for that, I'm not interested in your society anyway. I really am not,
I I
and
wish we
that's
could go on, but I'm afraid that I
no,
have to
it's
go
okay.
and do more work. But
Well,
thank
here's
you
what I
very
want to
much
say.
for appearing on my channel, Dean. And I guess if you want to do a plug before we sign off.
Yeah, let me just repeat. I know this is tough. I know the way I'm
Mhm.
doing that escaping atheism team sends alarm bells off for some people. And we're going to listen to people who are reasoned, thoughtful critics and who have specific things they want to say. But our goal really is to put the cultural stink on atheism and make you a little ashamed to say that you're an atheist publicly. That's really one of our goals. And I don't care if it takes 5, 10 years to accomplish that. Because what I have seen is nothing. I see that atheism culturally has given us nothing. It has done nothing positive for anyone ever at any time.
Mhm.
And it is nothing but cultural toxin. And probably the worst thing about it is the atheist presumption that they're the rational ones and that they own science and that they own rationality itself and that they own secularism. These are root assumptions in our culture now that would have been alien just 30 years ago. And so, and we want the kid who's being picked on because he believes in God to be able to say he does. We want people in China to be able to say, we're not atheists, even though our government wants us to be. I want Buddhists. By the way, did you know a survey of Buddhists shows the majority of Buddhists believe in God worldwide, but the Chinese government puts out the message that Buddhists are atheists.
Mhm.
And our press goes along with that. So does Wikipedia. They're all wrong. Buddhism is a theist religion. It always has been. But the cultural Marxists have convinced everybody that it's a default atheist religion.
Mhm.
No, it's not. So we genuinely view atheism as a toxic cultural force, not just a minor disagreement. And we can cite you priests and bishops and others who agree. And so
Mhm.
we want people to feel safe to say, no, I'm not an atheist. In fact, I don't even like atheism. And we want people to feel that they can criticize atheism.
Well, I can get behind that. So perhaps we can end there. That
we can. And so
people
come check us
still,
out. Come check us out.
criticizing atheism.
Listen to some of our videos. Listen to the fact that we're not telling you believe or burn, come to Jesus or go to hell. That's not us. We see a very negative cultural thing going on here, and that's what we want to criticize. And just check us out, escapingatheism.com or the Escaping Atheism channel. We do try and make reasoned arguments.
Cool.
So let me just put it to you this way. If you can handle Christopher Hitchens being snotty, you can handle me being snotty.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Dean, and I'll
Thanks
talk
a lot,
to you later.
Dave.
Okay, I have to run.
Anytime. Have a good one.
Cheers. Goodbye.